Welcome to reality. All brainwashing has nothing to do with a silly slave syndrome myth. That silly myth presents what would in fact be the least effective method used for controlling generations of millions of people. It's simply not how true brainwashing is achieved. Here's the truth. There are 4 ways to effectively brainwash an entire generation of people. By what we're taught, by what we see, by what we hear, and through repetition. Because our oppressors controls the education we're taught, the media images that we see, and the societal narratives that we hear, through repetitive propaganda programming, they brainwash millions of Black people to think in ways that are against our own self-interest and that instead serves the interests of their white society. It's the true reason why millions of Black people now perceives ourselves as being our own worst enemies and reveres our oppressors in spite of such a brutally horrific history of the contrary. This noted way of thinking that clearly benefits the white society is far too widespread among the Black masses to be coincidental. It's not coincidental. It's actually by deliberate design. It's always by deliberate design whenever the oppressed population starts thinking exactly as their oppressors want them to think. The collective aggressions of the Black masses has been deliberately shifted away from the white oppressive society and has been redirected against ourselves. It's how they now prevents us from unifying ourselves against them. Regardless of how intelligent people are, if it's possible to control the input of information that are systematically fed into their minds, it's entirely possible to control what they'll believe. White oppressive forces have exploited their monopoly over information that are systematically fed into the collective minds of the Black population to manipulate millions of us to think in ways that are against our own self-interest and instead in ways that serves and protects the interests of the white society. More specifically, they've divided our ranks and they've shifted Black collective aggressions away from their white oppressive society and have redirected towards and against ourselves. This is all possible because people's thoughts align with the information that are fed into their minds. Therefore, if it's possible to control the input of information that people receive, it's entirely possible to control what people will believe. This is precisely what white oppressive forces have done to the Black population. Through their monopoly over information that we receive, which accordingly allows them to control what we believe, they've indoctrinated many self-defeating lies into our collective minds. It's truly mental slavery. The African slaves of the 21st century are those who cannot overcome and unlearn all of the mental enslaving lies that have been indoctrinated into our minds through the white society's monopoly over information that we receive. Those of us who are telling you the truth are trying to free you from a mental prison that you don't even know you're trapped within. It is the truth of our plight and condition. This is why those of us who know must teach African proverb. The following is an illustrated example that is intended to provide a mental reference of how the white society has mentally enslaved millions of Black people. We require a mental reference to it so we can figure it out. You know when you're driving on the interstate and you know when we see those electronic signs warning us of upcoming traffic hazards. For example, when we see a sign telling us that there's an accident 6 miles ahead and all lanes are blocked. Whenever we see such a sign, we immediately look for the next exit to take an alternative route to get to our destination. And we do this automatically because we've been conditioned to blindly accept that the presented information upon those electrical warning signs are always true. This scenario gives those who write those narratives upon those warning signs immense power over all drivers on the interstate. Likewise, this is precisely what the white society has done to us. They write all of the narratives that we receive, and they've conditioned us to blindly perceive them as being the authorities of all truths, in spite of their notoriously deceitful history of the contrary. We've literally been brainwashed to blindly believe whatever history's proven most notoriously deceitful and most narcissistic group tells us to believe. Whenever such a described group controls what millions of Black people blindly believe, have been conditioned to blindly believe, they will always feed us lies that falsely exalt themselves and that give themselves greater social power and control over us. It's the notoriously deceitful and narcissistic people they are. It's the way they've always been, and it's the only way they know how to be. And it's what they've always done to us. Case, point, and proof. It was first done to us with the Christian religion. The early white Christians did not convert Africans into Christians to save our souls so that we may join them in heaven in the afterlife. This is an irrefutable fact because they in fact believed that heaven was for whites only, and they believed that we Africans had no souls. The true reason they converted Africans into Christians was to embed the image of a white God into our collective subconscious minds. When we are made to believe that the greatest entity in the universe is a white God, this embeds a subliminal message into our collective minds that Caucasians, being also white, are inherently closer to God, and therefore we are inherently lesser than Caucasians. This subliminal message happens within most of us without us even realizing it. Subliminal messages are hidden propaganda that are deliberately designed to bypass the conscious mind, but becomes embedded and starts functioning within the subconscious mind. Once the false belief of a white God has been successfully embedded into the subconscious minds of the Black population, this causes many of us to perceive ourselves as being inherently subordinate to Caucasians. This is why Christianity was such a vital part of the white society's colonization process throughout the non-white world. It makes us subservient towards whites and more compliant with white dominance over our lives. And therefore, it made Africans into more obedient slaves for the white society. Christianity is just one example of how the white society exploits its monopoly over information that are fed into our minds to feed us lies that falsely exalt themselves and that gives them greater power and greater control over us. The truth of the matter is that virtually all information that we've received from the white society are filled with fraudulent propaganda that meets this same objective. We're constantly being inundated with white exalting and white empowering propaganda. It's embedded within the whitewash education we're taught that has distorted many facts to make their racial group appear more relevant throughout history than they truly in fact were. They've turned many Black historical figures white and have also falsely given themselves credit for most inventions and achievements that were in fact made by Black people. The false exalting of their racial group is also embedded even within the movies and TV shows that we watch, while we think we're just being entertained. Those movies and TV shows that constantly depicts the oppressors as being white saviors and heroes righting all wrongs is the true reason why they are now most often favorably perceived as being the racial group possessing the highest morals and ethical values in spite of such a brutally horrific history and reality of the contrary. Through their monopoly over the narratives and media images that are constantly being fed into the minds of the public, they've given their group a favorable and accurate image makeover within our collective minds. This is why they're so positively perceived in spite of the reality to the contrary. The white society sits upon a throne of white exalting lies. For centuries, there have existed agreed upon concerted efforts by the white ruling class to distort all facts to falsely exalt their racial group above all others. And when I say they distort all facts to falsely favor themselves, I do mean everything, regardless of how petty. They even distort their maps to make Western countries appear significantly larger than their true sizes, while making all countries where people of color originated appear significantly smaller than their true sizes. They even make Africa appear 13 times smaller than its true relative size. The white society sits upon a throne of white exalting, empowering lies. The nefarious practice is called Orwellian propaganda. Orwellian propaganda describes societal conditions created and sustained by false propaganda, disinformation, misinformation, distortion of facts, denial of truth, and even the manipulation of the past to falsely exalt the white society. It's practiced by repressive white governments. This Orwellian propaganda campaign is at the root of the false internalized feelings of superiority that many whites possess. White historians justify this unethical whitewashing practice as being merely the spoils of war, thus saying that it's customary for conquerors to distort all facts and rewrite history to favor themselves. But the true reason it's being done is much more self-serving of the white society. The true reason it's being done is because, according to white social scientists, in order for a dominant group to maintain its position of social dominance within the society, that the information fed into the society, including the history and the narratives, must endorse the dominant group's position of social dominance. This means that all information fed into the society about the dominant group must exalt them above their subordinate groups. This false exalting of the dominant group conveys a subliminal message that the dominant group is inherently superior and is therefore supposed to rule over its subordinate populations. Subliminal messages are false information that are embedded in propaganda that are designed to bypass the conscious mind but becomes embedded and within the subconscious mind. When the subliminal message that Caucasians are inherently superior and are therefore supposed to rule over us has been successfully embedded into our subconscious minds, this not only makes us more compliant with white dominance over our lives, it in many cases makes us even prefer it. White social scientists describe this nefarious practice as merely instilling a value system into the collective minds of the Black population that makes us more compliant with white dominance over our lives. More specifically, they say it makes us adhere to the authority of the existing infrastructure of the white dominant society. Given that the white society's true narratives and history does not endorse their position of social dominance, they've whitewashed many facts to falsely exalt themselves in order to meet that objective. Doing so provides the white society with a false perception of reality and a false historical platform that endorses their current position of social dominance. According to white social scientists, truth is not important. What's only important for steering a society towards an applied objective is what's perceived as being true, because people function based upon their perceptions of what's true rather than actually what is true. Therefore, by merely creating the perception of white racial superiority is all that's required for maintaining their social dominance and social capital within the society. Through their monopoly over everything that we've been made to believe, white oppressive forces have created an elaborate prison for our minds. It's the real matrix. I'm trying to show you the truth in order to free your mind, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it. It's time to elevate your mind above biblical fairy tales and silly myths and start learning the truth of our plighted condition. One love and peace.